Hello, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon, and it's great being back with you as we continue in our series on unmasking addiction. We're in this area of relapse prevention, which is the last part of our series on unmasking addiction, and I hope you've been enjoying it. Relapse prevention involves a lot of things, so we have many different parts regarding this, and I wanted to get into all these different parts because it entails recovery, and recovery is lifelong. It's not just 6 months or a year after someone comes out of a treatment program. Recovery also involves all the facets that someone would go through in a healing process, whether it's for depression, bipolar, or any other kind of affective disorders, even personality disorders, any of those issues. That's all the same dynamics that are occurring as it would be in recovering from addiction. And so all of this applies, which is why we're getting into more of those details regarding relapse, and it is very involved because it's not something you just do once or twice, which most people, that's what they do. A few times they work on this, they work on that, and they have this up and down effect going on where they're feeling better, they stop going to counseling, or they stop dealing with working on these things, and they start cycling down again. Something happens, and then they go back to working on it again, paying more attention to it, and so on, and you get this up and down cycle, perhaps for the rest of their life. It doesn't have to be like that, because the longer you work on that upscale of building yourself up, strengthening yourself, doing all those right things to be the better you, you're climbing higher and higher, and you want to keep climbing, and that's important. So we've been talking about the 10 compromising warning signs in crisis, in recovery. Last time we spoke about internal warning signs, and then avoidance and defense behavior. Today we're in crisis building. What happens when crisis occurs? As you're feeling better, perhaps you're coming out of treatment, or you're just doing better in whatever recovery you might be involved in, and stress is building up. That's crisis, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of like as stress builds up, there's a crisis point. There's a point where, oops, I don't know if I can take this anymore. And that's building up of that crisis when you're not dealing with it immediately, not addressing it. Crisis building occurs. Now the crisis is getting more intense. It's becoming stronger and stronger, affecting everything around you. Crisis building refers to a process within addiction recovery where an individual or their support network, so it's not just the individual, this could be the support network could be in crisis. Perhaps they have issues, or the friends, family, support group, treatment center, whatever it might be. Perhaps they have issues of crisis building themselves, which is going to affect you in some way. So it's not just you, it's what's going on around you. Your employment, they're in crisis. Your family members are in crisis, and that crisis building is going to affect you as well. So crisis building refers to not only the process within addiction recovery, but where the individual and their support network may consciously or unconsciously amplify a situation to bring about a realization, intervention, or decisive change. Something, you hit that, okay, I can't take it anymore, I gotta bring about change, I gotta do something about it. However, the difference can be positive or it can be negative. So when a crisis is building, what choices are you gonna make? Are you gonna make good choices or bad? If you make good choices, then that crisis could be something good. It could be something that's gonna make you better. If you make bad choices, the crisis is not going to be good. It's going to be something that's going to make you worse. It can be both a turning point, which is good, or a turning point which is bad. as we navigate through contemplation, action, and maintenance stages of recovery, it's important to stay motivated and focused on the goal. What's your goal? You know, we encourage people in counseling, whether it's recovery or just any kind of counseling, what's the goal? What do you want to get out of counseling? What do you want to get out of the changes you'd like to make? It's not just looking at what I need to change today, it's the goal of, if I change something today, where am I reaching? What am I reaching for? Because what I might change today, if I'm not reaching for something, is just going to come back tomorrow. Let's find ways to use a crisis to drive us closer to God, because He's that source that's perfect. So it gives us that finish line, that direction, that goal to strive for. As we're constantly going in that direction, we're becoming better. We're actually, you might say, shining brighter as you reach the light. Because the closer you get to the light, the more fluorescent the light envelops you and shines out of you. The closer we get to the light, however, we start to see more of those dark things, those things inside of us that we didn't see before. Now I need to work harder, or I need to do more, or I need to continue work in dealing with these things that didn't show up before, because now I'm closer to the truth, closer to the light, closer to God. And He's revealing more, helping me to see more, which inspires me to want to do more. So drive closer to God and be encouraged and inspired by the words of the Bible as we navigate the stages of recovery. And basically, there's 6, according to researchers, there's about 6 unfavorable choices that people often make that are part of that crisis building dynamic or period of time that's going on within that level of crisis building. The first is self-destructive behavior, then feelings of entitlement, division within oneself, insufficient preparation or poor planning, rigid thinking, legalism you might say, but rigid thinking. Feelings of depression is number 6 on that list. And we're going to talk about each of those, but the first is that self-destructive behavior. The trouble with self-destructive behavior, also known as self-sabotaging during addiction recovery, is that it hinders the progress and growth one needs to overcome their struggles. Conflict between how they perceive themselves and how others perceive them. This conflict arises from the pressure to meet the expectations and opinions of others, as well as your own expectations and opinions, and it weakens that image, that self-image inside of you. It weakens that self-image where they may feel inferior, constantly seek validation, reassurance, what do you think about me? Or, are you mad at me? Or, they're constantly doing that. And they may feel inferior, constantly seeking that validation, or believe that they're not capable enough. So they're digging a hole each time they have to fill the hole. They try to fill it, but it only gets deeper. It undermines their self-worth, their dignity, and sense of identity, consequently affecting their relationships. To address and change this behavior during recovery, it's essential first to identify what are the triggers. If there's something wrong, I got to figure out what's wrong, and what is the problem. Those underlying issues causing it, and identifying the triggers involves engaging in honesty, self-reflection. Okay, let me really look at what is it about me, or I'm having troubles with everybody. It's everybody's fault. No, I'm the one thing that has to do with everybody. So what is it about me that could be contributing to that? I have to be honest with that. So many people come into counseling and they're not being honest. They want to deal with an issue that might be happening at the moment, but to find the trigger that promoted that issue, they're not ready to do that, or they think they're ready, but they're really not. So being open to change is important when you're identifying those triggers, and having that solid determination to follow through despite the challenges that may arise. So many individuals will deal with the crisis that's going on, because that's usually the first thing we're going to deal with in counseling. But then, okay, why did that start? Why did that occur? What brought that on? How can we prevent that from happening again? In those cases, we now have to look back to identify what are the sources of all that. Oops, I don't want to go there. Oops, no, there's nothing else. I'm fine. And next thing you know, you might hear from them a year or 5 years later. These things have repeated themselves because they haven't really dealt with those original sources, what might be fueling that fire, that, as we call it in Christian counseling, the negative stronghold in the past, those bad memories that are locked away, the hurts and the pains, those unresolved things of the past, where it's allowing the intense negative emotions to come out and hit this little thing that's going on with this tidal wave of emotions, making it almost impossible, if not very difficult, to cope with this, but never addressing its source. We want to address those sources. And it's true, it's difficult, and sometimes you're just not ready, and that's okay. You don't have to be ready all the time, but work towards those things, work towards those goals of becoming ready to face this or to face that. With God's guidance, we can overcome self-destructive behavior by following 3 steps. Learn what's morally correct by immersing ourselves in studying God's Word. Cultivate a genuine desire to align hearts and desires with the Holy Spirit's guidance, asking for His transformative intervention. And implement righteous actions. So in other words, I'm learning, I'm gaining, but now I have to do those righteous actions, those good actions, doing what is morally right or ethically right, or even though you don't feel like doing right, doing it anyway, implementing righteous actions that maintain a commitment to doing what's right. The second negative choice of crisis building is entitlement, feelings of entitlement. Now, that's growing, isn't it? More entitled people out there nowadays, it seems like. Entitlement is the belief that one inherently deserves privileges or special treatment. You can't turn on the TV without hearing about entitlement issues anymore. In addiction recovery, this attitude may manifest in various ways, including a lack of personal responsibility associated with pride, unrealistic expectations, and resistance to change. Entitlement issues in recovery are, we could say, multifaceted. They involve a lot of things, but a few things to talk about is a belief that one's problems are caused by external forces rather than personal choices. So in other words, when someone is constantly blaming, or you find yourself constantly blaming, that's an entitlement issue. You got to pay attention to that. Hey, why am I feeling entitled about this? Somebody goes shopping and you think they're going to come back happy, but they're complaining, they're identifying all the things that went wrong. what's going on there? There's blaming going on. There's entitlement, and they've lost the joy of whatever it is that they were doing because they could only see what was wrong. They were focusing on the blaming. Expects instant success without effort. Deserving special treatment is another characteristic. Resists making necessary changes in behavior, lifestyle, or thinking patterns, believing they don't need to conform to typical recovery protocols or personality adjustments that we all have to make. Even as I'm getting older, I have to constantly make little adjustments in my personality because I'm getting older. Things are changing. I'm perceiving things a little different. I have to constantly make those little adjustments. But people who are rigid in their thinking are unable to make those adjustments, and they actually get worse instead of better as they grow older. I guess it's kind of like addiction itself. Most addicts get worse as the years progress. They're not getting better, and that's why they die younger. But if they stop their addiction and make those adjustments and are working on things, they get better and better. Entitlement contrasts the virtues of humility and self-sacrifice, which are essential for personal transformation and growth. I encourage you to read Psalms chapter 73 and pick up a few little tidbits on that. Surrendering to God as a higher power and accepting one's limitations aligns with the values that often facilitate successful recovery or improvements in your life, personality improvements, attitude improvements. Make those little adjustments, those little changes. The Apostle Paul presents a powerful reminder that Christ willingly relinquished his rights or his entitlements for us to partake in his magnificence. He gave of himself for us to partake of what he was giving, to reap the benefits of his sacrifice. Isn't that part of having a good relationship with others, that giving? Because as we're giving, we're going to get back. Others are going to want to give back. If you're around healthy people, that's especially true. If you're around unhealthy people, you might want to identify which ones to avoid, but still, giving, you're going to reap what you sow. As believers, our trust in God should extend beyond moments of unmet desires, inspired by selflessness of our Savior. Please let go of those perceived entitlements, those things that it's mine and I'm not letting go of it. Or if it's taken, oh, it's mine, I'm going to blow up and make a big deal out of it because I'm not getting what I want. That's entitlement. What does that do? It just makes you sicker. Doesn't make you better. It makes you worse, along with everybody else around you. Isn't that part of what we did when we were kids? Yeah, because our brains weren't developed enough yet. We go through that adolescent phase of narcissism, of entitlements and all that, and we grow out of it. That's part of maturity. It's a passage. And so many people get stuck in adolescence emotionally. So their emotional IQ is still 13, 14 years old, even though they might be 50 or 60 years old. They're still relating in those ways. And what does that mean? That means they have to escape more in order to feel better. They have to do things to counteract the fact that they're constantly upset. They're constantly stressed. Everybody's doing everything wrong, so they escape to feel better with the intoxicants, with those things that make them feel better, the quick fixes, whether it's drugs, alcohol, or shopping, or something else that gives a quick fix, but you become prone towards being addicted to it. You can't live without it. You have to have it, and then it's a snowballing effect. In following this divine example, we can find inspiration and clarity in Christian journey through addiction recovery. The third negative choice in crisis building is division within oneself. It's kind of like looking in the mirror, and you're seeing yourself, but then you might not be seeing yourself. In addiction recovery, the emergence of internal division, such as splitting, presents a formidable obstacle. The defense mechanism, also called black and white thinking, involves perceiving oneself and others solely in terms of good or bad, devoid of any middle ground. Now, in personality identification with personality disorders, we might look at that and say there's like a switch that switches on, and that person just can't see what's really in front of them. They only see what they have chosen to remember about whatever that thing is in front of them or person is in front of them, that whatever that person represents. Whatever the need is that I'm not getting met, the switch gets switched on. What do you mean you're not giving me the dollar? You never do things for me. You never give me things. It's always about you, and so on and so forth. But the day before, they can't remember you just gave them $5. The switch switched on, and they can't see it. All they can see is the negative. All they can see is the bad. There's no middle ground. There's no gray area. That middle ground isn't there. The truth, the reality isn't there. It's on or off. And that's that splitting that occurs within individuals in crisis building with the negative choices of not working on that. An example of splitting involves directing one's romantic partner to depart and subsequently pleading with them to stay once they've actually left. I hate you, don't leave me, is a common theme that you hear in that regard. In addition, it entails assigning another person's actions solely to their inherent righteousness or wickedness rather than recognizing them as multifaceted, as a good person in general. They have all these other good traits. Yeah, they got this bad thing or they got this really good thing, and there's all this in between. Instead of recognizing them as multifaceted individuals with a combination of positive and negative and neutral qualities. It's a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde dynamic. In addiction recovery, division with oneself or splitting defense mechanism can be detrimental and hinders self-reflection. I mean, why would I look at myself if there's nothing wrong with me? It's all you. The switch gets switched on, and it's all about everything bad that you've done, everything that you haven't done right, and so on and so forth, instead of seeing all these other things that are good. It's like driving down the road and you hit a bumpy spot, and now all you can think about is the entire road is bumpy. What a terrible road this is. Oh, it was just awful the ride home yesterday. It was just bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. But really, that was only one block that was bumpy. All the rest was all new paved road. But all they can remember is the bumpy part, the pothole in that one block radius. So in addiction recovery, division within oneself or that splitting defense mechanism can be detrimental as it hinders self-reflection, growth, and the ability to establish meaningful connections. How can you connect? How can you have genuine relationships when you're that way? By dividing the self or others, so it's not just perceiving self, it's perceiving others, into either entirely good or entirely bad. Well, individuals with addiction tendencies fail to acknowledge their complexities or accept their mistakes. Oops, my bad, sorry, let's move on. They get stuck It's not their bad, it's your bad, because whatever they did that was bad, it was only because you made them do it. The fourth negative choice in crisis building is insufficient preparation. Insufficient planning, we could call it. It's just poor planning. Intentional or not, it doesn't matter. Insufficient planning in addiction recovery can lead to crisis in various ways, creating obstacles for both the individual in recovery and the professionals involved in their care. It hinders progress and perpetuates cycles of relapse. A few underlying causes of insufficient preparation leading to relapse might be the lack of understanding of addiction as a disease rather than a moral failing can lead to insufficient planning. In other words, gee, I just need to detox, or I just need to get through the withdrawal. I just need a couple of months and then I'll be fine. So they don't make the proper planning. They don't think ahead long enough. It's not a it's not a lifetime lifestyle change. It's changing for the moment and then expecting everything to be well thereafter. Resource constraints within lifestyle or treatment facilities, such as inadequate staffing. So in other words, it's not just the person, but inadequate planning can be due to others, the treatment program or the recovery group or the Sunday school class even. If there's poor planning going on, it can cause difficulties in growth, in maturing, in improving, or in learning. So such as inadequate staffing, funding, income, access of specialized care can limit the planning process. A focus on short-term gains instead of long-term recovery may hinder proper planning. When I have something I need to do in the day, I think ahead and I plan, okay, how am I going to start the day so I can be sure to get this thing done or this errand taken care of. And then I carry through with my plan to be able to get to the store at this particular time where the traffic isn't so bad, and where it works out well, that it's not going to interfere with the other plans that I might have made for that day, and it all flows in that direction. If we're not making proper planning and we just leave in the morning, helter-skelter, doesn't matter, just go and, well, I'll get it done if I get it done, blah, 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 likelihood is it's not going to get done, isn't that? I'm sure you've experienced that. Or it gets done at the worst possible time, at the worst possible moment, and everything does go wrong when that occurs. So insufficient planning presents another challenge. Neglecting to prepare for ongoing support once formal treatment concludes, thereby resulting in the isolation of individuals. Poor recovery planning is comparable to building a house without a solid foundation. Without a clear and well thought out plan, the structure is bound to crumble under that pressure, under that stress. Read Matthew chapter 7 in your New Testament regarding that. It'll give you some insights. Rigid thinking is also a negative choice in crisis building. Rigid thinking can involve many things, but it's an inflexibility. It's an inability to be open-minded, to hear, even if you may know this is what you want, or this is what you're going to do, or this is what you're going to believe, you still listen, you still hear what others are saying, or you still observe what others are doing. There's always something to learn from it. In counseling, I've been doing this over 30 years. Every client, I look forward to every new client that comes in, and every every day with clients because I'm always learning something new. If I remain closed-minded and say, well, I know it all, there's nothing, they can't tell me anything, I can't learn anything, well, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to shrivel up. I'm going to become dumber instead of smarter, or I'm going to have more difficulties relating to others because I'm going to be rigid in my thinking. I'm going to be closed-minded. Instead, I keep an open mind in recognizing that everyone has something to offer. Everyone has something to teach me that I can learn from. Every situation that someone presents who comes in is a situation where there's something in it, something new that I can learn from, that I can grow from, that can make me a better counselor or a better person. So I look for those things and it helps me to thrive. Unfortunately, people with rigid thinking, they've closed their minds to the point that they're not even going to listen. They're not even going to hear. They may act like they're listening, but they're not hearing. And what occurs is they become more shriveled. They, like the Dead Sea, stuff's not coming through. There's water coming in, but it's not going out. It's not clearing. It's not fresh anymore. It's dead on the inside. So in addiction recovery, inflexible thinking is a form of closed-mindedness. Rigid thinking is akin to tunnel vision, where one cannot entertain different perspectives or ideas. I believe in Christ. No one's going to change that belief system from me. But I could be rigid in my thinking or legalistic in my thinking that I'm not going to hear anyone else or see anyone else, and I'm not going to learn and grow and thrive. But I choose to allow myself to hear this or hear that, hear this from that faith or this faith or whatever. It's not going to change my belief, but it's going to help me to learn about them. It's going to help me to gather new truths that perhaps I wasn't thinking about in my belief, because I believe all truths come from God, even if it's from another religion or another organization. If I'm employed with an organization and there's another competitor over here, this is a truth is a truth. You can't get around it. It's a fact. It's something good's going to come out of it. What truth can I learn from here, from there, to make me better in my belief as a Christian or my belief in my employment or whatever it might be? A narrow-minded view might prevent them from considering alternative coping strategies, accepting help from different sources, or recognizing the underlying issues contributing to addiction. Overcoming the hindrance caused by narrow-mindedness in addiction or in any other area requires a more open and holistic approach by encouraging flexibility in treatment providers, educating society and families, and understanding individual needs. The last area we're going to talk about is depression. In the negative choices that people make in crisis building are feelings of depression. Depression can impede addiction recovery in various ways. It can lead to a lack of motivation, impair judgment, decision-making abilities. It can cause social isolation and interfere with treatment. Now you might ask, well, what choices do you have with depression? It doesn't just come over you and you can't do anything about it. No, for most people, most depression, there are choices that can be made, things you can do to prevent it, to heal it, to restore yourself faster through whatever might be going on. There are choices that can improve improve whatever's happening with depression. Then you have those that are chemically depressed, that is, it's an internal biological, you might say DNA issue that might be going on with them. And yeah, there's no control, nothing, not much they can do about that other than take the medicine that they need to take. Even that's very difficult for them when it's that way. But we're talking a minority there. We're talking very few. Everyone else with depression, most everyone else with depression, it's going to be choices that are made. Now, I'm still going through my grieving of my wife, Linda, transferring to heaven. I grieve. With the grieving, there's a little touch of depression. I don't allow myself to allow the depression to grow, just like I don't allow the grieving to control my day. I may tear up, I may have a sad moment, I may say to myself, you know, I don't have time right now, so tonight at 8 o'clock I'll grieve for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. I'll allow myself to feel sad, to feel blue, to feel unmotivated, to feel whatever I might feel. But then it's over. Okay, half hour's gone, I've got to move on now, got the rest of the night to deal with. We'll do it again tomorrow if I need to. I'm making choices in the grieving as I get through the little depressive episodes that might occur. You're no different than I am. And in recovery, they're no different than that as well. They have to make their choices, not to dwell in the valley of depression, not to stay down there, because that valley is going to dip even deeper if they allow themselves to. So depression requires an integrative treatment approach to recovery. Dual diagnosis treatment is a common term that's often heard. Dual diagnosis treatment recognizes the interplay between addiction and depression or other conditions like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or other affective disorders. It's recognizing there's another thing at play here besides the recovery, and we need to address this other thing as well, not just the recovery, not just the addiction, but also whatever other issues may be at play. And that's dual diagnosis treatment that recognizes the interplay between addiction and depression, treating them as interconnected rather than just something separate. Well, we'll deal with this, and when you're done, then you can go deal with that. It doesn't work. That's what they used to do, and they've had, in the past, they've had very poor recovery results as a result of that. So addressing both at the same time is what's needed. So doing so aims to address the root causes and underlying connections that bind these two connections. Individualized care becomes important in this integrative approach, customizing treatment plans to cater to the individual. You know, my treatment plan for my grief may be different than a treatment plan for someone else's grief. We have to adapt to that, not just say, well, this works for me, so it ought to work for you. Or this doesn't work for me, so it's not going to work for you. No, we're all different. We have to figure that out and work it out, and that's that individualized care that's needed. So customizing that treatment to improve that integrative approach for recovery ensures the tandem treatment of depression or whatever else and addiction. Dual treatment includes therapy, medication, lifestyle changes, support groups tailored for that individual. Some individuals, let's say someone who has a sex addiction problem, they may not be able to attend sex addiction groups because perhaps things are said there that when they walk out, they feel more inclined to their sex addiction. But that works for others. So then maybe that individual needs to go to a different type of group in helping them, and that's okay. As long as it's helping, that's what counts. That's that individualized treatment. Everyone's a little different. They don't have to do it the way everybody else does, but do it in a way that works. So support groups tailored to each individual needs. And then in the integrative approach to recovery, focusing on the holistic approach, not just read this book, do what it says. These are the educators who have researched this, therefore go through those steps. Oh, wait a minute, there's more to it than just that. An integrative treatment approach looks beyond symptoms and seeks to address the individual's emotional, physical, spiritual, and social aspects. This approach often aligns well with the principles of Christian counseling and emphasizes a holistic path to recovery and healing. Well, what does the Bible say about all this? Let me read to you this passage. And we know that in all things, at all times, in all circumstances, God works for the good of His creation and for the good of all who love Him. Those who have accepted God's call to work with Him according to His purpose experience the good things that God has for them. For God foreknew who would accept and value His methods of love and who would reject Him and His methods of love. And God predetermined that all who accept the truth about Him and trust in Him would fully be healed and transformed in character to be like His Son. That word predetermined doesn't mean He chooses this person over you or that person over someone else. It means He has chosen this group here, this system, this belief, for anyone who chooses it is predetermined to be received by Him. It's not selective. It's your choice, as so many other things are in relationship with God. And He called all humanity, whom He predetermined should be healed and restored to repentance and reconciliation. Those who accept the truth, the Bible goes on to say, and respond to the call, He sets right with Himself, and trust is restored. And those whom He sets right in trust, He also transforms in character to His glorious ideal as revealed in Jesus. That's from Romans chapter 8, verses 28 to 30 from the Remedy Bible, paraphrase of the Bible. That's what the Bible has to say. That's what God has to say. Hey, cling to Him and He'll help you. That's part of the Holy Spirit that comes into us when we trust and we're opening that door for Him to come in and help us. Then we have that little extra something to get through whatever the task is, whatever the problem is. This morning my back was really hurting. I just, I had to sit on the heating pad a little longer before I got going. I kept saying to myself, I can do all things through Christ. I can do all things, whatever the Lord, whatever I'm going to depend on. If I'm trusting in the Lord, I can get through it. I can get through it. I'm trusting in the Lord, I'm going to get. Well, I just kept saying that, and I got through it, and I got here and was able to do what I have to do. It wasn't easy, but sometimes we have to say those things to ourselves. What do you say to yourself to help you get through those difficult moments where crisis is building, where you're at the pinnacle of the crisis? What things do you say that helps you get over it and through it and over it? Or what things are you saying that just makes it worse and causes you to crash? Next time we're going to talk about immobilization in identifying the warning signs in recovery. May your troubles be more minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. God bless. We'll see you next time.